Hey everyone, I'm Felix. Welcome back to the Roaming Gomes. When we first started on the road full time in 2019, we were about as green as you could get. We didn't have anybody to educate us or guide us to get better. We were on our own. I want to try and share some of the mistakes we made so that when you start on your full-time RV life, you don't have to make them. Now, the first big mistake I made, and this was all me, was before we even left our sticks and bricks. We had the RV parked in the driveway, and we were pretty much living in it. We really didn't go into the apartment at all to do anything. We were acclimating ourselves to living in a small space, and we were acclimating our 3 animals to live in this RV. Then one day, I got the bright idea that I could empty the gray tank. We didn't have a sewer hookup, but we were on a sloped driveway, and at the end of that driveway was a sewer grate. This was just soapy water, so no big deal. So I stepped outside the RV, walked over, sat down on the pavement in the driveway, and I pulled the cap off of the sewer pipe and immediately dumped the black tank on my lap. Why? Because the black tank valve was wide open. The only thing that had kept that from flowing out onto the driveway previously was that cap. So when I pulled it off, it unleashed. Yes, I closed the black tank quickly, and it really wasn't the full black tank that emptied out onto the driveway, but it was enough of it to be pretty disgusting and kind of a toxic dump. So, tip for you: whenever you take possession of an RV, whether it be a new one or a used one, before you use your tanks, black or gray, make sure that those valves are closed. If they're not, don't use the tanks, close them. Once they're closed, you're good to go. Even if you close them after you've used the tanks and before you pull that cap off, you're still going to have wastewater in the pipe. And yeah, it won't give a big dump, but you're going to get a good rush of water out of there, both black and gray. Shortly after that happened, we went on the road, and we were heading to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it wasn't long into the ride that I came to the realization that the truck that I was using to pull that rig was not enough truck. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't unsafe in any way, shape, or form. I could accelerate and keep a good speed on the highways. I could stop it with no problem. But going up any kind of incline or any hill or mountain, I was beating on that truck for it to actually do it. When we left Santa Rosa and we were going through the mountains outside of Santa Rosa, I was taking that truck up to 5,000 RPMs regularly. My heat sensor for my transmission was getting into the yellow and at times touching the red. We had bought that truck to tow my boat, which all totaled was maybe 2,000 pounds with the trailer. For that purpose, that truck was perfect. But it had the smallest V8 engine that Ford offers in a pickup truck, the 4.6 liter V8. And that wasn't like a lot of the EcoBoosts you see today, where they're 3.5 liters. but they could have pulled that rig with no problem. This was just a regular old 4.6 liter V8 engine and was not intended to pull something that big. Like I said, I wasn't unsafe, but I would have killed that truck very early in its life if I had continued to use it for that purpose. That truck only had 40,000 miles on it when we went on the road. If I had continued to use it, it probably would have been dead by 50,000 miles. Which is why we switched trucks when we got to Las Cruces, New Mexico, and I'm now driving an F-250 that tows this rig with no problem. Once we got to Tulsa, Oklahoma, we got there on October 31st, Halloween Day of 2019. And the weather wasn't so bad. It was kind of warm, nice. But it wasn't long after that we started getting some very, very cold nights. And we woke up one morning and our water supply was completely frozen. So I waited until the sun came up and the temperature rose just above freezing. And it started to flow again. The water started to flow. So I left my bathroom sink with a trickle of water coming out to ensure that it didn't refreeze. And I went to Lowe's to get heat tape. Now, the water supply in that park was a pipe coming up out of the ground, probably about 2 feet, and had the spigot up on top of it. The pipe itself had frozen. It wasn't we had a heated hose, but the pipe itself had frozen. So I went to Lowe's, got the heat tape, brought it back, walked into the rig, and saw immediately as I walked in a 6-inch wide, 1-inch deep river of water flowing from my bathroom to the front of my rig. Very simply, the stopper in the sink had dropped down. The sink filled up and was flowing out. That very easily could have destroyed the rig. Fortunately, there was really no damage. And I was able to get it cleaned up and wrap the pipe and so on and so forth. Very simple tip here. Take that stopper out of the sink. I did. I put in a screen so that hair and so on and so forth couldn't get down there. And that's what I went with from there forward. You don't need that stopper unless you're actively standing there and filling your sink. The stopper in this rig is sitting underneath the sink in the vanity. I have yet to have to pull it out and use it. It was actually one of the first things I did when we got in this rig. Then in South Carolina, we purchased this new rig. And we brought it home from Camping World and drove back to the RV park and pulled it into the spot. And I unhitched. And before I could even pull the truck forward, this RV started to roll backwards. If there had been a little bit more slope in that spot, we very well could have rolled this thing right into oblivion. Fortunately, the jack wedged into the ground and stopped the rig from rolling backwards any further. But that was only because we didn't put the chocks under the tires. And that is something you need to always remember to do. Chocks need to be under your tires, front and back, before you unhitch from your truck. Once again, talking about this rig and when we purchased it, one of the things that we did when we were looking at this rig was we checked what we thought was everything. We checked the electric. We checked the plumbing. We did a general look over in cosmetics, made sure that the refrigerator was working, made sure that the propane was correct, which, by the way, they didn't actually have a regulator on the propane tanks. So they had to put one on. But what we didn't do was something very simple, which is open and close all the doors and open and close all the windows. If we had, I would have been able to tell that this window was installed improperly. And I would have saved myself a lot of headaches. When I first opened this window for the very first time in South Carolina, the weather had gotten nice and I wanted to have the windows open. I went to open this window and it literally, no exaggeration, literally exploded in my face. The glass shattered all over the rig. To this day, which it's almost 2 years later now, we are still finding very small pieces of the glass from that window. And it was because it was installed improperly. If I had opened and closed that window while we were still on the lot, it would have done exactly what it did when we got back to the RV park. It would have exploded there. And we could have not taken delivery of this rig and had them replace the window properly. Check everything before you take delivery of your new or used RV. When we were going from Tucson back to Tifton, Georgia, we stopped at an RV park in Louisiana. Beautiful RV park, which, by the way, we stopped twice, and I'm going to talk about the other place in a second. But both of those RV parks were really, really nice. And I don't know if that's indicative of all RV parks in Louisiana or just we got lucky and those two were great. But anyway, we stopped at an RV park in Louisiana. And when I stop for an overnight, I don't unhitch. Some people think that's like the devil's work. Some people are like, yeah, of course, you don't unhitch. It's just a night. But what I do is I lower the tongue jack just enough to start to lift the truck up a little, just to relieve the pressure on the springs. The following morning, when we were getting ready to leave, we unhooked our water and unhooked the electric and pulled the slides in and did all the things. And we pulled out. And as we were pulling out, probably about 6 campers were running towards us from all directions, screaming, "Stop, stop, your tongue jack is down." This was an instance of we didn't learn from our own mistake. When I was going from our Sticks and Bricks to the first RV park we were going to stay at, I had left, and my wife wasn't there at the time. She was at work, so I was doing this on my own. I left one of the basement doors open, wide open, like up on the magnet. Fortunately, there was a tractor-trailer driver who saw it and waved me down and told me, and I got out. I pulled over, got out, closed it. One other time, and I don't remember which park this was at, but we left our stairs down as we were starting to pull out. Fortunately, my wife was right behind me. She saw it right away, and we really didn't even move with the stairs down. So, but always, before you start to move, do a double check. Walk around the entire rig. Make sure everything is in place for travel. Now, as I mentioned, we stayed at 2 RV parks in Louisiana on that trip from Tucson to Tifton. And the second RV park that we stayed in was beautiful. It was wooded. It was pretty much, you felt like you were in the middle of a forest, but they were full hookup sites and it was just really nice. And they were level. I needed to empty the black tank. So when we got there, I hooked up my sewer hose and I went to empty the black tank. And this was toxic dump 2. It wasn't really a toxic dump like the way it was back in our driveway, but the hose had split. About halfway down the length of the hose, there was a split in the hose. And the black tank wastewater was starting to flow out of there. A lot of it was going past it because it really wasn't that big of a split, but there was still a bit of drop out of the hose. So, whenever you're hooking up your sewer hose, run a check on it first. Look along the entire thing, make sure that there's no splits or damage to the hose. Basically, what had happened to us was we were in Tucson, Arizona for the entire summer, and that hot summer sun here was just beating down on that hose, and it made it brittle. So when I expanded it to hook up, it split. Fortunately, the people in the RV park were really wonderful people, and they didn't give me a hard time about it or anything like that. And I had another piece of hose that I could hook up. So I still was able to empty my black tank, but you don't want to be doing a toxic waste dump. And the final thing, again, this goes back to our trip from North Carolina to Tulsa, Oklahoma. We had laid out the trip to do about 6-hour days, but that was based on Google Maps, which is what we use. What it put in as a 6-hour ride really was if you got in a car and just drove. It didn't take into account things like bathroom stops, stopping often for gas, driving a V8 engine that the miles per gallon is dropped considerably when you're towing, keeping your speed down, all those things. So what it laid out as a 6-hour trip turned into be more like an 8-hour trip. So we, in our 3 stops, overnight stops along the way to Tulsa, we were getting to those parks near dark. Remember, it was October. And after the park offices had closed. So we were new RVers who really didn't have much of a clue. And we were getting to these RV parks and having to set up and settle in the dark without the assistance of the staff. Now, all 3 of the parks that we were staying in have as their normal process leading you to your site when you get there. but not if you get there after hours. So we had to go find our own sites. We had to figure out how to get into the sites, because I think the first two weren't pull-through sites. They were back-in sites. And we had to do all of this in the dark. Since then, we have made the personal decision to no longer do any more than 4 hours in a day. And that generally will put us in our overnight stay by 12:30, 1 o'clock. I think the latest since then that we've gotten to an RV park is like 3. But, and again, I'm not telling you that this is what you must do. If you feel comfortable getting to an RV park or getting to wherever you're staying overnight and setting up and settling in the dark, then fine, you do you. But I can tell you that I don't think that as a new RVer, that is the optimal. I think you would be much better served ensuring that you get there when the staff is on duty and it's still light out. And that's all I got for this week. If you want to see something about how we downsized to get into our RV life, check out this video right here. Until next time, I'm Felix. Safe travels.